Welcome to recoverHER, the podcast where your healing journey begins. I'm Heather Novak, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Tracy Oppenheim, a compassionate psychiatrist. Today, we embark on a path of recovery and self-discovery. We are dedicated to inspiring each and every one of you to overcome your struggles and live your best, most fulfilling life. Your recovery starts now, and we're here with you every step of the way.
It's only up from here, 'cause there's no one else that's me.
Well, hey, welcome back to the podcast, recoverHER. Hi, Heather.
Hi.
And we are here with a super special guest,
Thank you.
Deb Levine.
Deb.
And she comes to us by way of, actually, it's funny because our kids go to school together, but we did not have a connection that
All
way.
of our kids.
Yeah, all of our kids,
all
which
of
is
our kids
interesting.
happened
Yeah.
to be there. But Deb is focused on intuitive healing and spiritual mentoring, combining ancient wisdom and energy healing to guide individuals towards transformation and self-discovery. And she...
That sounds really impressive.
does.
Do I do
I
that?
like it. Sign me
yeah,
up.
yeah. It's not as heavy as it sounds, though. I think
Yeah.
it's a lot lighter than that. But
And your company is called Souls Wisdom.
it's called Soul Wisdom.
Soul
Although my website is the Soul Wisdom, so a lot of people think it's called that. It's just because that was the only domain name I could
Okay.
get.
Got
Soul
it.
Wisdom was
Soul
already
Wisdom.
taken.
We know that game.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we are.
So yeah, I represent Soul Wisdom, but I chose that name because of I think the catalyst for me was when I finally woke up and started listening to the wisdom that my soul had to offer. We all have wisdom within ourselves. A lot of times we don't want to hear it, or it starts out as a whisper and then it becomes a really loud, obnoxious scream, which is what happened with me. And when I really started listening to it and seeing the value in the wisdom that I had myself within my soul, my life started to change in ways that were difficult, but also very transformative and ultimately now really positive.
When you say wisdom, is
Mhm.
that the same as your intuition?
That's a really good question. And I don't think anyone has ever asked that. Yeah, I would say absolutely. That
Okay.
wisdom within the soul is the gut knowing, which is, yes, intuition. That's how I look at that. Mm-hmm.
How old were you when you were able to tap into that inner knowing?
I mean, quite frankly, it's been my whole life, but I didn't know what I was tapping into.
Right.
Like so many of us, we were talking a little bit before we started here
Mhm.
about the fact that we are all born with intuition. Like
Right.
I'm not special. We all have intuition. But there are those of us that are a little more fine-tuned with it. It doesn't, make me better than anybody. It just happens to be, you've honed in on real estate and design, and you've honed in on psychiatry, excuse me, and I've honed in on connecting with those that are no longer in their physical bodies and connecting in with the soul with those people that are still here in the living. That's that's kind of my thing.
So if we all, I have so many questions for you.
Yeah.
I just love
Hopefully
it.
I'll have so many, not answers, but I think it's just,
We were
I just love conversation
I know.
about
we were
it.
talking
There are
so
no
much
set
before
answers.
we pressed record that
Yeah.
I was almost getting frustrated that we weren't
Let's
recording because it
record,
was
right.
such good stuff.
And
But
it'll come up again.
you just said, you and Dr. O were talking before we were recording about how we all are born with that level of all-knowing
Yeah.
intuition, right?
Yeah.
Of that omniscient presence within us.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know your opinion on how, your opinions on how you think that we lose access to our intuition, how some people are like yourself are more tied into it, more familiar with that part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so many others tend to, your
Push it.
intuition becomes such a distant friend, if not even an enemy to our own inner guiding strength and wisdom. So how do we lose it?
Well, I think, I don't know that we lose it. And I love how you said you want to know my opinion, because I will tell you, I always steer clear of anyone in the spiritual field that says they have an answer. And I talk about this all the time with my mentor in workshops. I will always raise the question to my mentor and I say, but no one can know, we can't know this. You're going to have listeners that are like, you have a medium intuitive on how do I know that she really talks to the non-living? How do we know that? I mean, because it's not a tangible, right? So all of these things are my opinion based on my experience from my own life and my perspective. So my opinion is that we block it. Do we block it intentionally? No. We start out as these wide-eyed, pure beings, right? I mean, do you think a baby cares how it looks? Is the baby like, oh my God, how's my, is my onesie looking good? How's my diaper? No one cares
when it can
about
happily
that.
lay in its own shit.
Exactly.
Absolutely
Like when you
not.
can lay in your own shit, like gurgle and look up at the ceiling. Why are we so free when we're babies? And even because the world, society, our families, our parental units, whoever you were raised by, we're given messages about who we are.
Absolutely.
And the problem is we move along with life, allowing other people to tell us who we are. And if you're anything like me, I believed it. Now, the added difficulty to this was not only did I let other people tell me who I was and I believed it, I sought so hard to be accepted and validated and pleased. Okay, how many of us are, and I know a lot of people in my field are recovering people pleasers. And people are like, well, were you always like that? Why? Like, did I have abusive parents? No, I had amazing parents, maybe a little too amazing. Fear-based. And I know my parents started watching going, are you always going to say that about us? I love you guys. I do. But my parents they didn't want me to have hardship. It was like helicopter parenting. So they wanted to jump in and save me. So I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust that I could do anything for myself.
Not serving you a whole lot, protecting you from reality so much.
Exactly. And as a baby, as infants, as toddlers and children, we do rely on the people around us first, right? To make sure we are physically safe. And then the messages that we get, whether it's from the media or whether it's just from society, of who we're
Churches,
supposed to be,
schools,
all the
of your
institutions,
places.
everything, whatever you were raised with. If you were raised with formal religion, if you were raised in with certain institutions feeding you certain things, it's like, well, that's okay. Well, this is who I am. Oh, and I guess I'm this way. And then now I'm going to be careful about how I say this, but I'm a 70s kid. Gender was a loaded thing. Now it's much more fluid, but it wasn't then. So you're a female, you need to be this way. You can't be too much. You can't. I blocked out. I don't want to, because I will often get on a tangent. So get me back in, because my ADHD brain will go.
It's a great answer.
I blocked out who I was. My intuition was always right there. And it was like, and I can't tell you how many times. So I literally saw, as I see things as a medium, in my mind's eye, red flags periodically throughout my life. And I was like, oh, no. Put those down. Maybe it's just a car race I'm about to see. No, there were red flags and everything in my body. So it's not just that as the medium, I am able to see or sense things. We as human beings, whether you are tapped into your intuition much or not, we feel it in our physical bodies. I'm sure, as a doctor, you talk about this, right? So we embody what we are feeling. We are embodying, am I embodying anxiousness? Am I embodying stress? Well, yes, and yes. My whole life, that's what I did. Now I can say, I mean, it's not that I'm never stressed, but now because I have ripped the Band-Aid off my eyes and I'm no longer blocking my intuition, I am so much more open to seeing all the things, whether they're uncomfortable, because I always tell people the biggest thing to get where I am now is sitting in my muck. And nobody likes to sit in their own shit. It is uncomfortable. So you do have plenty
Except
of people.
for those babies, remember? So it's
which is
very interesting.
And I love that I just said that, because I did not mean to say that, but just thank you for bringing that back. Yeah. So we don't care about sitting in our own shit as infants, but now we don't want to. We don't want to go near it.
Isn't that interesting?
It stinks. It's uncomfortable, but it's the truest way. At least, again, for me, it was my truest way back to myself, and that meant accepting all of that stuff that I don't really like this. Now, does that mean if I really thought I was an asshole of a person, I'll just accept that I'm an asshole and I'm going to spit my,
No,
put
it's-
my crap on people?
Yeah, it's being with what is, I think.
Yes.
And in some ways, like Heather and I are both like now so determined in our lives to, run towards discomfort, not intentionally seeking it out by it sometimes. But if something is uncomfortable, I want to be with that rather than
Yes.
pretending and living in a weird fantasy
That
land
it's not real.
that it's not real.
Because that will ultimately, as we probably all three have experienced, that will bite you in the butt at some point.
Right.
And the thing is, there are enough people I know, because I have a lot of clients that are wonderful people, but this happens. Some people will just continue to be bit in the butt and have a really sore rear end for the rest of their
Kick
lives.
the can down the road of life is another
it's a
way of living. Sure.
And
Yeah.
it just often it's because it's what's comfortable. And I am not a therapist. So
I know. But there is
I-
a lot of comfort in the familiar. And so what I think you were saying as well is that I've always been a fan of like you just were talking about, sitting in the deep, dark, black sludge, going there, knowing full well I will emerge on the other side with more knowing of
More knowledge.
myself,
And that's-
more
Yes.
space.
Yes.
So I do too applaud people and also internally for myself, look for those blockages that stand in my way of my usefulness to you and my fellows so that I can grow and be a better version of myself. But that is a painful sometimes existence because
And
you're
were you
not
always
ignoring.
like, what was it always like that for you? Because I have to say that sounds like a very evolved way of thinking. I'd like to think that I operate that way now too, but I for sure know the Deb 1.0 version that did not do that. Now, I didn't act like everything was great, but I knew there were major things about myself and my life that I was avoiding, and I avoided it with all the other things.
Of course.
Binge eating,
Of course.
binge watching TV, binge shopping, everything I could. Nothing that was actually extremely harmful. Although eating is it's a legal drug that no one. I mean, that was a very painful thing because that caused shame, just like someone would experience a what do you call it? Is it an illicit drug? Is that the word I'm wanting?
Addiction.
Yeah,
to
addiction.
anything.
It's the same thing.
Same.
But it was reaching for anything else to avoid what was here.
Yeah, and I've done that. I've absolutely done that.
So
with
you
me
have
and
that.
my
You've been
husband
through-
with alcohol. Of just of avoiding more of myself, of that uncovering. And I today, I know I can probably slip back into behaviors that take me away from my most evolved self.
But you'd probably notice it. You'd probably be really quick. And that's what I try. This is the thing. And I try to explain this to clients that are really on, I'm going to hate, I cringe even saying this, but when I call it a healing journey or working on the self, if you will.
It's just life.
But people feel like, oh my gosh, I thought I was
done.
I thought I was done, or I thought I was at least so far from that behavior or doing that thing. It's happening again, gosh, and then they'll beat themselves with the frying pan. And it's like, actually, that's a huge thing because what's happening is you have the awareness, you're noticing it. And so you're able to.
You have a choice now.
You have a choice, but it's also anytime that feeling comes up, and I talked about feeling in the body, that is, I say, our higher self's way of saying, hey, we're not okay here. Or I like to say it's like the inner child stuff. We're not feeling safe. What are we not feeling? We're not feeling safe. We're not feeling comfortable. But why? This thing is feeling uncomfortable because it's trying to show me something. Now, the old me would have run back into the cave and eaten the chocolate chips out of the bag and watched Real Housewives so I wouldn't have to be in the knowing of it. Right. But now I'm so curious about
It's
myself.
such a nice word.
It is. Like, I love that because curiosity about any behaviors, yours or other people.
Yeah.
Notice, curiosity, I want to say this right now intuitively, not criticism.
Or judgment.
Curiosity. Of other people and especially of ourselves. We're very quick. Notice, we're so quick to judge look at that person. And this is why I can't do a lot of like, the mom's hanging out in the younger days. And this person, because everyone's pointing the finger because it's so much easier to do that than to look right here. So when we are noticing things out of curiosity, well, you know what? It doesn't give a person an excuse for piss poor behavior. But if I can have the awareness of why that person is engaging with me and not take it personally because what is it? Other people's opinions of me or their reactions to me is none of my business. So it's not for me to handle, but then the boundaries come in. Then it becomes my choice. Because now I'm no longer the people pleaser, right? Or at least I'm working not to be. It's my choice to no longer engage, which is why, unfortunately.
Take that power back.
Exactly. And stand in your power, stand in your truth. But it's why this journey can be really difficult sitting in the muck because ultimately, you guys have probably experienced, we lose a lot of our relationship dynamics with people that maybe we thought would go the distance because we are not operating from the same place that we were where we made things okay.
Right.
For other people or for ourselves. And we see things now and we see what we're not willing to accept. It doesn't mean that we can't love or be kind to that person from a distance, but it means I'm not willing to let that in because it disrupts my peace. And I will tell you, at age 50 now, the one thing I know, there is nothing welcome in my life. Oh, I thank you.
We didn't plan this. It's a standing ovation for this one.
If it doesn't bring me peace, I get the choice not to have it in my life.
But Deb, it's so interesting too, and I wonder. I have like so many things running through my head, but I want to say three things.
Okay.
So number one, for people listening, this doesn't have to happen all at once. This can be.
It can't. It cannot. It won't.
We're all in our 50s.
It will not happen.
Some
all at
freedom.
But
once.
it's a gradual unfolding that I
Yes.
think you need support to go through. And so until you have like the ability to be with your nervous system
Yes.
and self-regulate, until you have other things to substitute besides like
Drugs
I
or
have
alcohol,
food things
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
you know, the chips or
Yeah.
whatever is
Chocolate chips are
going
mine,
in your mouth.
Uh-huh.
Until you can feel safe within
yourself.
it's not like you need to go from 0 to 100. I'll tell you that where I'm at today has been,
that
you know,
makes
like
me emotional.
has been, well, it's true. And I think we're so hard on ourselves. And it's been like a 12-year journey, continued journey, you know, coming home to myself.
May I interject for a
Of
second?
course.
Just to reflect for you,
Yeah.
because am I allowed to say that
Yeah, of
because
course.
we've worked together
Yeah.
before. So was it once or twice?
I think once.
Okay. All I can tell you is that there is and no one can validate this, I know, but I'm just saying this to you. I would say this off camera. There has been a definite shift in your energy. And this is like when you greeted me at the door. No, it's a more grounded, more, I want to say sure-footed is the word that comes.
Trust.
Because it feels like you are more connected to yourself.
100%.
But just know that I want to reflect that because I
Thank
haven't
you.
seen you. I mean, and I've actually only met you one time in person at curriculum night at school. Like I'm like, I actually could, this was after I had done the reading for you. But I met you on Zoom.
Yes.
So it wasn't even like I was with you in person, but there has been it's a definite shift.
Yes.
Meaning it feels like the feeling I have with you is, I'm not doing a reading, but you are much more accepting of the multiple layers of you. It doesn't mean that you want to stop going on this,
No, I'm going.
but I hope at least that I say stop and smell the roses, that you pause and invite yourself to celebrate how far you've come. There's never going to be perfection. And the problem is, I think a lot of us recovering people pleasers came from a place of, I was a perfectionist. Except the funny thing is I was miserable at it because I know perfectionists that are like genuinely good
at it.
I talk about, I used to say the Pinterest moms. Like if you look back through my personal Facebook page,
This is so good.
when I tell you I could, there's
Nobody
like,
is scrapbooking in this room.
it's not even that, the cute boards, like first day of school, last day of school. I'll never forget my kids. It was at my last house. This is before my divorce. I was running late. My kids were, I think, maybe my daughter was in middle school. My son was I think they were both in middle school, probably their first year. They're both in middle school together. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like yelling at them. We're running late. And they were trying to get in the car. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even get a picture of you guys. And my daughter's like, I don't want to take it. So they turn around, they're just looking at me. And I was like, can you hold, I want to just hold up like a piece of, line paper with I didn't even bother to do that because like he was in grade 5 and she was in grade 8.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I failed miserably at this parenting. And so meaning like I couldn't, I strove for this like feeling of whatever perfection is, but I really failed miserably, but I didn't have a sense of humor about it then. I was like, why beating myself up? Why can't I be better?
It's so good to have really allow that humor
Yes.
in. And then so two things. The other question.
You said 3 things at first.
Yeah,
That was your first
I'm
thing.
adding 2 more on.
Okay.
This is
Well, no,
so,
you can
this is
opt
so
for
good.
it.
I also think it's no coincidence that 50, 50, 50.
Right.
Right? Like
I'm
it's
actually
a
51.
Oh.
shit
just
last
turned.
week.
Oh, you
51.
yes. Okay, so she snuck that
Older.
extra year
I'm
in there.
catching up to you in
Okay,
4 weeks.
Okay.
January 1st baby over here.
But I wonder if there's like, this peak, right? Like this second peak that we
There
hit.
is.
And I think
Mhm.
it's intentional. I think that, that the human design is that way.
Mhm.
And so I think oftentimes what people are calling a midlife crisis is actually like a return home to
An
that
awakening.
an awakening where you can no longer, your system can't hold not knowing anymore.
You just said a word that I wanted, and I loved it. And like, this is how you were like, you have such a great memory. I'm like, I can't remember the word you just said. that
Awakening?
sparked- No, it was before that. But you were talking about coming. Not a midlife crisis. You said, did you say awakening right after that? There was another word you used, but it's funny. During a meditation, I heard, this is a couple years ago, a line to a song. I didn't realize it was a Supertramp song, Take the Long Way Home. And I have the
Yeah.
tattoo to remind me, because I'm like, gosh, it seems like it's taking forever. I don't look at anything. It's funny you say like midlife crisis. I think, and this is a sweet spot, and again, I don't want to make it gender specific, because I think every person experiences midlife in a different way. For me, I know so many people that are like, oh, and it's my back or this and that. I mean, I feel very fortunate. You're blessed if you have your health. Number one, you have that, you're ahead of the game. But in addition to that, like having my physical, obviously mental, I also think of spiritual health as being a thing.
Mhm.
I feel like, you'll read the memes on Instagram. It's like, oh, now you don't have to give a shit, and all your fucks fly away. Like, you just don't have to care anymore. But I actually think I do care more about the right things. I
right
know what
things.
matters to me.
Yes.
And the fucks I don't have to give are the things that are so
frivolous and do not matter.
and frivolous, meaning not just the opinions of others, but, and I was never into the stuff. It was never about the material stuff. But what I remember, I used to do these things called Sunday musings on my Instagram page. And I would basically, like, if something just came up, I would talk about it, only if it felt important. I remember having this experience where when you're in the moment, you're not supposed to know you're in the moment, right? Like, because then you're
100%.
I remember I felt just this utter quietness. I'm not thinking what's happening in 3 days from now. What am I going to make for dinner tonight? I shouldn't have done that yesterday. I call it's like this feeling of stillness. It's just being in the now, where you're like, I'm laughing and I'm noticing that I'm laughing. I am present with the fact that I feel good, like laughing with someone that you care about. This is going to sound so cheesy, so I hope you don't lose listeners, because like, who's this cheesy lady that's saying this? But this is really how I feel. So actually, I don't give a fuck what your listeners. I know, I'm just kidding. I say that, with love, but I feel
that with love. I'm going to use that.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I'm not saying it in a harsh way. What I meant is, I am so happy to acknowledge the fact that just feeling good, because I'm sitting, like, having my cup of coffee, and my daughter's home from college and she's telling me something silly, or, I'm FaceTiming with my love and I get to see him and I'm like, I just feel all giddy. That I'm not like, okay, but what if I don't have this? But then I still need this. Everything I need, I curate in each moment. I feel like that word curate has been coming up so much for me. It's all, I think you used the word intentional, or maybe when you were talking about midlife, it's intentional now. And maybe it's because we have the 49 and a half, or how many years behind us from sitting at this point. And we can say, you know what? Why did I worry about that?
It really felt, to me, it really felt like life or death. And
turning 50, you're saying?
No, that was
Oh.
awesome. No,
Okay.
but just this, over the last 10 years, like
Yes.
I had a choice to make.
Yes.
I could go night for the rest of my life, meaning I could just kind of like sleepwalk around.
Sleepwalk through your rest
And
of
it
your
wouldn't,
life?
and it wouldn't have been like a
Wouldn't have been
terrible,
horrible. Yeah.
like sleepwalking.
Yes.
But I literally felt like not
Your soul had died.
depressed.
Your soul had died.
You're dead inside. I didn't have access to vitality. That's a word that I'm
It's a great-
vibing on a lot lately.
Yep.
And so it was like, do I jump in and save my life by knowing what I know?
And you have to save your own.
Absolutely.
That's
And
the
being
critical thing.
and being
Yeah.
willing, even though it's like, right, there's going to be sitting in the shit.
Yeah.
There's going to be
Yeah.
discomfort.
Yeah.
There's going to be pain to other people. There's going to be loss. There's going to be,
Yes.
am I willing to go there, to save myself? And I think that one of the things I wonder about is when is intuition and mediumship, is that like on the same spectrum? Is it a spectrum?
That's, you guys ask really great questions because I've never heard it asked like that. Is there a spectrum? Do you mean, let me make sure I understand the question. Whereas like mediumship is on sort of the lower end of the spectrum, meaning like we all have
Kind of the
intuition.
opposite.
We're all in
Opposite.
touch.
Opposite. Flip it.
So meaning I have, and maybe this is,
All of our
We all have
intuition is alive
intuition.
and well.
We all have
but I don't, at this time in my existence, I don't have any ability to connect up with the spiritual world in my day-to-day. Meaning I'm spiritual, but what I'm saying is I can't communicate with, or sense energy that way. But I am intuitive, and I know that. So is intuition like kind of like a baby?
That's what I meant, like a
walking
baby.
and-
That's okay. That's what I am aware of the question you're asking. There's a couple things I'm going to say to that. Number one, I do want to interject and say that you actually can connect. I always tell my clients, I'm like, look, I don't want to be out of business, but you can connect to your loved ones that are in the spirit world. Maybe it's in a different way than I would, because if you're meeting me for the first time and I'm doing a reading for you, I'm a stranger. So let's say I'm working with Heather and I bring someone through that I don't know you, I don't know your people in spirit. It feels more like more dramatic because here's a stranger.
Right.
Clearly, like if there's a shared memory, or like I know that your grandfather's ashes would have been put in an urn that was on, in the back patio or the back sunroom. And how would she, like, she doesn't know me. She doesn't know my grandfather. And it may seem harder because you know your grandfather. So here's the thing, and I'm going to kind of weave all this together, but keep me on track because I have a way of getting off. You may feel like, is this me? Like, am I hearing this from my grandfather? And the same goes for, is this like, I felt like I got a nudge, like I shouldn't take that road to work. I should take the other road. But is that me? How do I know? And then we doubt it, right?
Yeah.
So do you understand why I'm saying that it's easier for you to know, oh, she's definitely with my grandfather. And that's definitely my grandfather communicating, because I've never met Deb before and she couldn't have known that.
Sure.
I've grew up with my grandfather. I know him. So how do I know that was really my grandfather making me feel like X, Y, or Z?
Interesting. So I need to take it easy on my dead people, because I have a shit ton of dead people.
Okay.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, you guys suck.
Because you feel
I
like they're
don't-
not showing up for
I
you?
don't- like I never, which is, I'm teasing, but I never felt like connected in that
In
way.
their
And
spirit
that's,
world.
and that's what.
Yeah.
But what I do say to Heather sometimes is I do feel like I have, unrelated to people dying, that's not what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but is like, I do feel like I have like a certain weightiness or heaviness to me, like a sadness that's
That's not yours.
that's not mine to carry. And like sometimes I'm like, fuck, man, let's cleave this off.
Right.
Like, but I've reframed it now where I'm like, okay, it's like also part of, it's a gift. It offers like some real benefit in this life, but sometimes very like, yeah, it's just heavy to carry
can-
sometimes.
It can be also, if you notice, let's say you go into a room where people were arguing, or if you were with a friend, or if you're having sadness and you're sitting together.
For a
and-
second, I thought you were going to say having sex.
No.
I was like,
That'd be fun.
I didn't know what kind of podcast this was. That'll be for the next time.
I was like, I'm the sex.
No.
Yes.
If
Sorry,
if someone
guys.
you love or a friend or a family member is sad,
Yeah.
and they're talking to you about it, not with your doctor hat on, but they're
Sure.
just talking to you. Do you leave like the rest of the day, or if your daughter, like, do you feel here? I'm going to give this example. Perfect example. You've both heard the phrase, "You're only as happy as your saddest child." For those of us that are parents out there, I totally like vehemently disagree with that now for myself. Meaning if I have two kids, if one of them were really sad, if I can only be as happy, like meaning if I can't be happy because that child is sad, I'm not going to be able to be a support for either of my
Sure.
children. Because and this was the better part of, unfortunately, their lives. And thankfully I've grown and I'm working on myself. And now I'm able to be there for my kids in a different way. Because if I'm picking up on their energy and if I'm taking on their energy, absorbing it, a lot of us run around, especially the empaths, the sensitive people.
Or the codependents.
Or the codependent. But
Yeah.
the codependence, there's probably a lot of people that are codependent are likely people that were, I say sensitives, people that, because, well, I shouldn't say this because this is not my area. This is Dr. O's area. But I find from my own experience of working with clients and even from myself that I just lost my train of thought. Get me back around. We were talking about, how I can show up for people. If I'm soaking that in and taking it on as my own, I'm not going to be able to be a support or really hold that space for someone. There's a way I can show up and be present without giving all the energy I have away and without also soaking it in.
Sure.
Because when we do that, we are not as useful to those around us, but we're also, I'm going to get this background. We're also exhausted, or you said you felt sort of a heaviness.
Yeah, it's not, I'm actually really good at like in my like day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Like I can leave things. Like I don't carry like other people's emotions.
That's good because for your work, that would be.
If someone's,
that'd be rough.
Yeah.
that'd be dicey.
As a
Yeah.
psychiatrist.
Yeah.
But if someone's anxious, if someone's angry, if someone's sad, I don't absorb that. I'm talking about like it's like a weird, not weird. It's just a
amazing,
spiritual.
I would say.
It's
Weird
just
is amazing.
It's
yes.
just a spiritual heaviness that I feel like is from
So you
the other side.
when you say, what's interesting is that may be the way you experience the energy of the spirit world. You're saying a heaviness, so you're not equating an emotion. You're not saying heavy. When I hear heavy, sometimes I think sad. Are you saying a sadness? Or are you saying you feel like when people feel a shift in the energy, they can describe it as the air feels heavier if someone's doing a reading. Like I can feel the presence of spirit. The air feels like it's shifted. It happens differently for all of us, but
it's like an awareness, and you know
awareness.
me obviously, better than anybody, but it's I would say it's like a spiritual awareness of all the suffering that's ever existed.
Oh,
I would say that you're likely highly tuned in then,
yeah,
Dr.
she
O.
sure is.
I would think
Tapped
that.
in.
You're like,
So
just
I
this.
was going to play, that's varsity level stuff, but on the surface,
Yeah.
my happiness isn't predicated on your
No.
happiness.
Right.
So it's not energy versus
Right.
like to like,
No.
even though other people are mirrors. So I feel like your heaviness and what you're talking about that you sometimes experience in full range of emotion, I find it to be really beautiful because it is
part
a
of-
heavy, you describe it accurately as a heaviness, but I base that on not so much the extenuation of the physical realm
No.
of the spiritual world of where they've
Mhm.
passed, right? And where that may be energetically,
Mm-hmm.
no one knows.
No one
So
knows.
it is what it is. But I feel like some of that, if there happens to be any unresolved stuff there at all, is kind of their ending of life because they all were really traumatic endings.
Yeah, I feel like it's even just like I've just always been this way. Like you're saying, like independent of this
Sure,
death. So
sure.
sorry for that little nugget, but I also want to jump back to.
Oh, I didn't answer the question. The is that the intuitive and mediumship you said, is that
yeah.
is that what you wanted to jump
So
back
the
to? I didn't.
mediumship is basically she's saying varsity level
Well-
stuff
well-
versus our intuition, which we all have and we're born with.
Yes.
Society buries it little by
Yes.
little.
Yes.
We potentially at midlife can start coming to the surface and
Yes.
breathing again and seeing life and energy through a new fresh lens,
Yes.
new pair of glasses, if you
Mhm.
will, and wanting to know more of your authentic self, which touches you into more spiritual life and beings that exist in God is either everything or nothing at all. And I choose to believe it is everything.
You just actually gave, like, you just answered almost in the way that I would have answered this question, which I love, in that, and I may add one other thing to it. I will say the word varsity, because when I think JV, it's like JV are the players that aren't as
You're
good.
elevated.
So, well, right, you're right. But what the way I think of it is a sharper attunement.
Yes.
It's almost like if you're like in a
Goggles.
microscope, you're
Dial it
fine
in.
tuning.
Mhm.
So we all are intuitive? Yes. Are some people? Do some people like myself because I communicate with the energy? It's all energy. Like we all know, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only change. Everything literally is energy, right? We are energy in this. This is the vessel, okay? This body. So we all have different looking vessels, big, small, short, all of it's different, but it's the vessel. So I always tell people, if the vessel weren't there, when I have clients that are really, I'm so grateful. I have just some of the most epic human. My clients are epic human beings, and a lot of them don't see that, or they don't remember. We'll take a page from the beginning of what we said in the beginning. They don't remember that epicness in themselves. And if you were to show up at a party and instead of worrying about what you're wearing, or I needed to lose 20 pounds, or I don't feel good about myself, if everyone had their souls around a table, what's interesting is the souls that you might be drawn to. If then all of a sudden it's like, boop, let's take this is who you might be like, I wouldn't have been drawn to that soul. Why? Because society, again, is giving us these messages of, well, this is what attractiveness, and I'm not talking about romantic, but I'm saying like, who are you drawn to in your circle, your friendship circle, the people in your family that you're closer to than others, your love relationships. For all of us, we are drawn to certain people. I say to my partner, if he gained 8,000 pounds, I would still think he was the sexiest person alive, because his aura, his soul I'm so drawn to everything he embodies. I mean, yes, he's a aesthetically a pleasing person to me. Wouldn't, for me but it's not about that. It's about the soul. The true nature of the soul is what draws us to people. Okay. So when I'm communicating, I'll stick to mediumship here. I'm communicating with the energy of souls. Now, you two are on the same physical plane that I am. So it's much easier for me.
Meaning all three of us are hot.
We're hot.
Thank you.
meaning when we sat down, and I don't think it was recorded, but I started talking. I didn't know anything about what Heather did. And I started talking about how I felt like, if I may share, that you are right brain and left brain, and I could sense this creativeness. I had a feeling you were good with design. It's very easy for me, being me, to pick up on Heather's energy. If I had talked to her for 30 more minutes, I could tell you a lot about your childhood. I'm reading your energy. I can read you just as easily. So when you say, I'm getting to the point of attunement, or varsity, if you want to say.
Sure.
So when I fine tune, if I can read you and your energy and anyone connected to you, it's almost like I have to fine tune a little bit more, because I'm now working with the energy of someone that is not on the same physical plane. They are in the spirit world. And if someone says, where is the spirit world, Deb? I'm going to tell you,
everywhere.
I don't know. It's
everywhere.
When people are like, well, are they up here? And I'm like, your mom isn't up here.
No.
But they're with us.
The air you breathe.
And again, my opinion, my perspective only. But so I try to explain, people are like, oh, well, you're so lucky you have these gifts. We all have gifts. And I'm not trying to deflect or say that I'm not. Yes, I'm special. My gifts are special. You're special. Your gifts are special. So are yours. So are his. We all have gifts of certain things. I joked about this with a friend yesterday. My plumber, who's the most amazing plumber ever, I have one thing wrong. I'm like, oh my God, I got to text Jerry because he'll know. And if he were to come over and not feel like he was like, I mean, I guess I'm good at plumbing. No, please own your gifts of plumbing, because now you're going to fix my sink.
Of course.
I'm not saying that's the only thing he's gifted with, but he has the ability to look at something. He has a mind that can fix things. I look at something, I'm like, I'm already overwhelmed. Not my gift.
So do you turn when you were talking about tuning into spiritual energies, it's almost like I pictured a radio, old school radio
frequency.
Yeah, a radio station, even that you turn the dial.
Yes.
So can you, for your in
for myself,
intuition
Okay.
and abilities,
Mhm.
psychic abilities.
Mhm.
Can you turn the station, turn it off?
100%. These are fabulous questions, but I think every podcast needs to take a lesson from the questions you're asking are very they're very insightful. Yes, and I must. I think there is a misconception.
Sure.
And actually I want to tie something in with this because I don't want to forget when you were talking about this attunement. The only way that I can be attuned, and don't let me forget the question that you just asked. The only way I can tap into this attunement of spirit is because of everything we just spoke about up until now, because of sitting in what I call the muck.
Yep.
Because the finer, so the radio frequency, the more in tune the radio frequency I am with this soul, my own, it's the only way I can really have clear, pure communication from your loved ones that are not here in their physical bodies anymore. The more I know myself, the more I am able to know others. Isn't that that's probably a quote somewhere, like knowing the self is knowing, I don't know, but it's something like that.
Well, it's proof that others are simply a mirror to our own image.
Beautifully said. Exactly. So, but in mediumship, why that is so hard, or why that is so not hard, why that is so vital. It's vital because if I'm unwilling to look at my stuff, to see the duality in myself, if I want to spiritually bypass and go, I'm going to live up here where everything is, spirit guides and angels and fairies. I had to go in the mess of my life and get into it and unearth it and deconstruct it and say, this doesn't fit. I'm not happy with this. Okay, I'm going to live with this, but I'm going to show myself grace about it and be gentle about it.
Yeah.
Think about how judgy I would be of your loved ones in spirit. You said that her loved ones had trauma. And I judged a spirit person one time in my early days of development. True story. A gentleman that died by suicide. It was not an official reading. I'm friends with his mother. And I was sitting, this is going to tie everything in. I love how this happens. I was not a developing medium, meaning like I have worked with mentors over the years. It's like education. You take continuing education. I just had a workshop with my mentor, John Johnson, yesterday, a workshop with 30 mediums. So it's you don't just like, oh, now I went to learn how to be a medium school and now I know how to be. So we're always working on the self, and we're always working and practicing and fine tuning. Okay. Get me back. What was I just saying? Because now I was already forgetting.
The judgment of a previous soul who had passed.
So I had not been done a lot of developing of myself or being willing to look at myself.
Okay.
And I was sitting at my dinner table alone. And this young man came through. And this is before my ADHD diagnosis, when I was still using the chocolate and the food, the sugar to make myself feel better. And in my mind, he just came through, which is going to hit your point on when you were talking about
turn it down,
because,
change the station if need be.
Because I don't walk around open at all, and if I did, my head would explode. But I didn't know that at the time, so I'm open and I'm like, it's a shame. It's a shame that because he used and it's a shame that you were using drugs, and it's a shame because maybe you could still be here, and he's like. I'm like, it's a shame you had to numb yourself, is the way I said it. And he's like, wow.
Yeah.
Aren't you misjudgy? And I was like, he's like, this is before he's like, what do you think you're doing with food? He goes, you're no better than I am. He said, yeah, I use drugs, but you're using food as a drug. We're no different. And I was sitting there, I was almost like, I'm like, he's 100% correct. And honestly, I mean, I have this gentleman in spirit to thank. And I was like, I can't keep doing this to myself. Why am I using sweets, food?
Absolutely.
Why am I binging? What am I trying to escape? Am I really willing to go there? And then I started to go there. And then my life started to unravel more and more. And my mediumship started to get louder and louder and louder. Because what happens was I was starting to quiet. Like ADHD to me was protection. That was the noise. Everything was noisy and operating on full cylinders. And I could not hear spirit. I heard spirit when I was a kid, when I was 13. And I was like, go away, go away, go away. Didn't want to hear spirit. I was freaked out. That was before I had, life issues of a 40-something-year-old. So now all of a sudden, I'm like, I need to start facing this stuff. So I'm going to answer your question, as I started to hone my natural, what I realized, these natural gifts or abilities. And I hate that word because it sounds like, but it is, like I said, we all have gifts. Some people are artists, musicians. You can fix things. You have an engineering mind. Mine is a gift of communication. And if you ask my parents, I've been doing this since I came out of the womb. I've been a communicator, a connector. It's my personality. So it's not at all surprising. It's almost like delightful for me to know now I'm connecting people that are no longer in their physical bodies with their loved ones in the physical. But what I learned is not only do I not have to walk around as this open channel, I cannot. And if you have a meeting that's like, oh my God, I have your grandmother, I have your aunt. For those of you that know, and I use Teresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, because she's like the most known. And people are like, oh, I personally, I believe that those gifts are 100% genuine. I love her shtick. I think she's a riot. I think a lot of it is edited for TV. I think if someone were to sit with her one-on-one, I think she would probably give a seriously amazing reading for someone. But the way the show is edited, they show her in the grocery store and she does this. Would you understand a relative that passed from the throat? And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's my. You would never in real life, you would never, ever, ever. It would be so irresponsible. So if this has happened to any of your listeners, run the other way. If someone's tapping on hi, I'm a medium and I have your dad here and he's saying, no, you don't spring that on someone. If I were to spring that on the checker at Sprouts when I was there the other day and they weren't prepared or maybe they didn't want to hear from a loved one. That is so irresponsible. So my long answer to your question is I turn the frequency down like anything. Are you, hopefully you're not analyzing everyone. Are you going like, if you go to a friend's house, you're like, we need to move these pillows and let's hang a picture. I mean, sometimes, right? And actually, that's actually a cute point that I just made for all of us, because there are times when, and I always say this to the people in my personal life, I'm not reading people. I'm not reading my friends. I had moms at school be like, when you're at an event, are you going? No, that would be so unethical. Can I? Yes. Will I? No. Can I sit next to someone on the plane and go, hey, I kind of want to dig into their stuff? No, it's not. That's not ethical.
Sure.
So I turn it off because when I am working and it doesn't take rituals. I don't do a sage wand 5 times and sit in this mantra and hold 7 crystals. And I'm not making fun of rituals because some people really, and I love crystals because they're fun.
Sure.
But I don't need crystals. I don't need to say a prayer in my head or wear a certain lucky shirt, like, the quarterback of a certain football team, maybe. I don't need to do certain things to connect because guess what? Like we also talked about before, the connection is me.
Yep.
If I am connected to myself, I am always connected to spirit. So so all of us, but for me to then work to do my fine tuning, it's when I say, now I'm working, now I'm ready. But could there be a day when I have a client and I'm not feeling either physically well, let's say like during COVID, or if I were really having like an emotional breakdown because I'm a human being, and let's say I'd lost a loved one, I probably would cancel a session. Is it because like, oh my God, people are like, are you afraid? It's not going to work? No. And that's not my ego. I'm never afraid it's not going to work because I've done the work on myself now to trust myself. And because I trust myself, I trust spirit because we are one and the same.
So two things. I think, well, okay. So this is going to sound like maybe a strange
Nothing
question,
is strange. I talk to deceased people. So anything else is, nothing is weird about. Yeah, it's all good. All good.
What I've noticed in psychiatry, right? Like when I'm interacting with someone who's manic. Okay. They're, depending on what kind of part of their mania they're in, they have access to a lot of intuition. And so that's a very high energy state. There's clearly like a shift that's going on metabolically in the brain and with neurotransmitters and so that's stood with me since residency because it was funny. I went to see this particular patient. I'm in training, so I'm like I don't know what's happening. I think I was a medical student at the time, and the intern that I was paired up with, so the psychiatric intern,
Okay.
we went to go see this guy together, and he was just so manic, so
Mm.
hyperverbal, like all over, very tangential. It was very hard to
Mm.
follow what he was saying. And then out of nowhere, he said to me, he's like, "This guy wants to fuck you," and I was like, "Excuse me?" Like referring to the intern that I was paired with.
Oh my gosh. I thought you were
The
talking about like someone.
No,
Okay.
no, the patient said that to me
Okay.
about my intern. He's like, and I
Awkward
was
moment.
you.
I was so taken
Okay.
aback, and then
Was the intern taken aback?
yeah, and then
Okay.
it was very interesting because he, anyways, it turns out that that was true, and
Interesting.
so after that, I was like, what? So I said, what made you, well, like, what made you say that? Like, how did it,
When-
When
the
he
patient?
wasn't in a manic episode, you were able to ask him, or
just
just in
In
comment?
passing.
and yeah, and and of course he
Oh,
couldn't
yeah.
tell me, but so often when I treat people that are in a manic episode, which
Mhm.
can be so destructive, I'm not, of course, we know the dangers of mania, but there is this different
Yeah.
connection or access, and
Altered
then
state, if you
and
will.
I think so. And then I notice for myself
Mm-hmm.
when I'm deep into ketosis,
Mm.
I have
Oh.
I have so much more access to my
Mhm.
intuition, and just like a connection to more. And I'm wondering with your neurodivergence in terms of the
Mhm.
ADHD, it's
Mm.
very. I'm wondering how we can play with this through
Mhm.
different states. And have you heard anything like that or experienced
Yeah,
that?
interesting
it's
connection.
it is interesting because to hear you say that about someone in a manic state, I have heard it regarding people with schizophrenia, and I am, again, I'm not in the same field as
Mhm.
you. I'm saying I've read this, um, and I hope I'm not going to say this wrong. One of my first mentors, Suzanne Giesman, wrote a book, and it was a true story. Oh, and I need to look up the book like right now. It's um, Wolf's Message. I believe it was called. It's one of the most powerful books about mediumship I've ever read, and it's almost like I would challenge someone to dispute this.
Mm.
Also, Suzanne Giesman used to work for the U.S. military, very high up. She's very right brained. Like she's not
Mm.
anyone that you would consider woo woo, like outwardly. She would tell you like she needs hard and firm answers. I mean, she is a science based mind. Okay, she taught at the U.S. Naval Academy,
Mhm.
and she didn't become a medium until later on in her life. But this book, I believe, she speaks about this gentleman that was schizophrenic, and I think, and if I'm wrong, then someone can shame me for this. But I think there was a connection made that, and maybe I'm combining two different things, that people in that there is a state of mind.
Mhm.
And I don't know much about schizophrenia, but that's not the same as having multiple personality. But they can hear voices. Is that
Mhm.
right? Okay, I think that then maybe this is the book I'm talking about. That the voices that they hear,
Mm.
they could be tapping into something. I don't. So I've heard something along the lines of what you're saying,
Mm.
and I guess the point is here. Is that an altered state? Is that the state that I'm going to? Does that have any connection to my ADHD? I think it would be interesting if someone took a poll of the number of mediums and
Yeah, I'd
intuitives
be curious.
that have anxiety, because mine was misdiagnosed.
Mm.
It was just supposedly general anxiety disorder. I was the most anxious kid from the time I could remember. Not
Mhm.
social anxiety, anxious. And what I learned was that my ADHD, the anxiety was the symptom of the ADHD, which is often,
Sure.
and women in their 40s are often misdiagnosed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, what I can tell you is it does feel like when I have different ways of communicating. I will just say there have been moments where I have gone into what mediums would call a light trance state, where I'm speaking
You don't
The-
know.
A light
Yeah.
I don't
language.
remember. It's not. It's
Right.
not. No, they're light languages when people
You're
do.
is it more
It's-
channeling?
No. It's I'm speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and I've recorded this
Yeah.
with a friend of mine in the Netherlands who. So we did this experiment together. The things that I were saying, like I wouldn't have known.
Mhm.
Deb wouldn't have known them. So whatever the information that was coming through, we looked up, and it had actual meaning, and it pertained to the certain things. I couldn't have known that. So that is an altered state.
Yep.
What am I tapping into? Is that connected to my neurodivergence? I don't know. I think there is. I do know that several of my friends in this world, I don't have a ton of, but the people in my workshops, and the people that I know often are either have anxiety disorder of some kind, or have ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That tends to be
Yeah, I don't
a
know.
theme.
just something that
It
yeah,
is interesting.
It's interesting to kind of think
Gifts,
about.
nonetheless.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, but I do know, when I had my ADHD diagnosis, everyone's like, well, there's a stigma. I said, it meant, I don't say it meant nothing to me. It was a relief to me.
for sure.
I want to say I don't care about, I love that I am aware of it, because I'm like, oh, so I'm not just a rude person and perpetually late. Like, to get here 9 minutes early, my daughter's like, you are not making coffee now. I'm like, yeah. She's like, you said you wanted to leave in 20 minutes. You haven't even showered or done
Right.
anything or gotten dressed. I was like, oh, so I shouldn't have the coffee. She's like, no, Mom, go.
Go. I love
So I
it.
came here with, I'm not caffeinated, which is kind of amazing.
You were
but,
early. She was early.
I was.
She made it.
I was like 9 minutes early, but that diagnosis helped me make sense of a lot of the parts of my personality.
Absolutely.
But it also made me realize that it was sort of a cover. Like, my mediumship was able to kind of, what do you call it? Like, fly under the
Yeah.
radar.
Right.
Mhm.
Stealth
Um,
mode.
It was,
Got you
because
by.
everything else was happening. I couldn't pay
Mhm.
attention to what
Mhm.
was really happening. And oddly enough, when all this started, I'm not a yoga person, but I had hurt myself in rowing on a rowing machine, and started to do yoga because I couldn't lift weights anymore.
Mm.
And in Shavasana was when, like, all of a sudden there were all of these deceased people, things I could
Mhm.
not know about.
When
And it
you
was
were
just
still,
like,
when you were quiet.
Yes,
to quiet
and
your mind.
I wanted to make
Meditation could be pretty dangerous for you.
well, meditation's actually amazing. And I wanted to say meditation is how, like, I started meditating, it was probably 15 years ago, and it was with guided meditations.
Mm.
Now I can't, now I need silence,
Yeah.
but it's so interesting. That was the very beginning. That was like the baby step of it. But when you made a comment about the altered state, I just did a breathwork class
Mm.
on Sunday, and I'm going to go back this because now I'm like addicted. I'm going to go back this coming weekend.
Ooh.
It was the trippiest, most altered state experience that I've ever had.
Right.
And
All
I
work
did
with your breath, not inside psychedelic medicine.
nothing.
Or,
I've never worked with. I've
Yeah.
never done I've never done any of that ayahuasca. I don't. That's not my thing.
Mm.
I'm not. I mean, I know what people swear by, but it's nothing I've ever done. Sound healing was my psychedelic of choice. I did sound healing classes for a year and a half, and I would get these incredible downloads. I would feel very connected to something outside of myself, to the point where I would take like pages of notes afterwards. This breathwork class, it was so trippy in the best possible way. But I also think what happened, I wouldn't have been able to have this experience even in breathwork
Yes.
had I not had all the other experiences
And
prior.
Exactly. And that's when at the beginning, when we talked about, it's an unfolding, there's no rush.
That's the best
but,
word. That is the best
But
word.
I think that, in my humble opinion, I think coming back to trust of self, coming
Everything.
back, to self-compassion, letting go of shame, and really just like honoring yourself in your
in your entirety.
entirety.
I love that.
It's going to allow so much access for all things, to creativity, to our intuition. And when I had my experience with you, and then I had done some Reiki with Deb Lambert, I was kind of in this state of like knowing, like I had like an intuition, and I was suffering about
I know.
what I
what you knew.
what I knew, and I was
Yes.
like trying so hard to be
to
like
not let it,
to not know it. So
Yeah.
the biggest gift I got from both of you was just know what you know. And then that allowed me to then trust myself. And when you're not looking outside of yourself for safety, and whether it's like a religious institution or
Yes.
like
Any
a
person, place, or
political
thing.
Anything.
person, place, or thing, when you're really like, I'm good. Like, I'm so good.
regardless of what happens.
Regardless, like,
it could be a shitstorm
And-
around you.
regardless of what happens on the
Yep.
outside,
And
that
it-
you ultimately have zero
Zero
control over
control
anyway.
over.
We
And
have
So it's like this practice of acceptance of yourself and of the
yes.
reality
Yeah.
that is around you.
and then
Yes.
just
So
be
that
curious.
you can, get the curiosity so that you can curate, as you
Yeah,
said earlier, your own reality, your
It's-
own life.
Yes.
That you can say, let's fucking go.
Yeah.
That there are no limitations.
Yeah.
We are our only
that
limitation.
is
And
the
it's like, do I want to be walking around like
No,
like
hell
like
no.
this and pretending, or do I want to be like, I can be with any reality. I just want to be in reality with what is. I
With
don't
what
want to be
is.
ignoring or
No.
pretending.
in the moment. But see, that's what, when I tell people, like, it's so cliche, like, live in the present, it's all we have. And it just, for a while, it just sounded like a thing I would hear or I would read. But again, until you start embodying it, meaning until you start living in that way, and the path is long and it is not linear. It's a hot
and it's not for
mess.
the faint of heart
No, it's-
living that way.
It's not. And I
Mm.
will tell you, that's the people that's, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. The people that are sitting there like, well, you're doing that. And even, I hate saying this, when it comes to politics, when it comes to religion, when it comes to all the big stuff, I always say it'd be so easy. We could all heal the world right now. And I say this, like, it's the
Yeah.
simplicity of it is,
It is.
look inside yourself
Yes.
and just, the world is a bunch of really hurt, uncared for, unloved children.
Mm.
And the thing is, a lot of people were literally hurt and uncared for and unloved. What we get the memo at, here's where I'll come full circle, when maybe we hit midlife, or at least when we get to a certain point, is, okay, you know what? And this comes up in a lot of people's readings. My parents didn't love me the way I needed. They were harsh, they were critical, they were abusive, X, Y, or Z. I didn't get what I needed. Number one, there's mourning, MOURING, for that. Did I spell it?
Yep.
MOURN? Okay. There's mourning for that. But then it's to realize, yes, young me deserved more than that. But you know what? I
Mhm.
can't get that from my parents now, which I will say, not to plug mediumship, but it's why mediumship can be so transformative and healing. Because when I sit with a client that I've never met, I don't know them, I don't know their dead people, and the mother in spirit is coming through saying words that this person, a specific memory, needed to hear.
Yeah.
The relief of that, it's not getting permission from someone else, but what we know now as these adults, or we do in midlife, is we get to give that child, our child selves, what we didn't have then. We can say, I wish it weren't that way. We can fight against it. We can be in crisis mode. We can blame other people. We can abuse ourselves and numb ourselves and go to sex, drugs, everything else. It's never your parents are never going to be the parents you wish you had. And then sometimes it's like, but that husband wasn't the husband you wish you had, because we choose the things because of the way we are conditioned. And now as adults, we're choosing them on behalf of that hurt little kid. I sit with a lot of clients that they feel a lot of guilt and shame, and they wish it were different. And they look back and they go, gosh, if only I hadn't chosen that college, that job, that partner.
No way.
And I said, but you're saying that from experience, from hindsight. And they come to me, they say, I will never tell someone their truth. I will never give someone their answers. If you are seeing a medium, intuitive, psychic, whatever you want to call them, that's giving them to you, then run and get your money back, because it's no one's job. I don't have anyone's truth. You have your truth. But what I can say is, the reason people, it's a judgment in hindsight. But if you, instead of judging what was, if we look at everything as the experience, that got us to here and now.
Yes.
We started with the experience of sitting in our own shit.
Yes.
And here we are as adults.
Yeah.
We're back rolling in our own shit for a different
Right.
reason. But the beauty now is, as the adult versions of that inner child, we get to curate.
Yeah.
Everything you just said,
that's
Dr. Which
it.
was so
Take that-
perfect.
take that power.
What is it that you
and that's
want?
exciting.
To own your, when I say take your power back, and no, for people watching this that are like, oh, well, she, of course, she can say that because she's there now. It was 25
Right.
years of a
Mhm.
lot of shit,
Yeah.
of therapy, of mentoring with mediumship, because mediumship is about the self. It was having to look at myself in a mirror in all the ways I didn't want to. And I slipped back. I did recently. I was so angry about something and I'm like, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be. I should be passive. But guess what? I'm not. So there's another invitation to get curious about, why did I feel this way? And then to work through it, because now I can say, without feeling conceited or ashamed, I know I'm worth it and I know I deserve that.
I love that.
I deserve the acceptance, the acknowledgement, and the love that I so needed from every other person in my life. But I was the last one to give that to myself.
So in some ways, I think that intuition and trusting your intuition is, you don't, it's not about, it's just coming home to yourself. You're not trying to predict the future or go take a time machine back in the past. And Heather's so good. One of the things that I think you're really gifted at is being with what is, and just will roll up your sleeves and say, okay, like here we are,
Which
like,
speaks to your
let's go.
loving the spontaneity, right? I mean, if you, people that enjoy spontaneity have the ability to appreciate and have respect for what is in that moment. And that's infectious, which is great, because that's the energy that you have. It is infectious, which actually, if I may say, it's a good balance, because you might need a little bit more someone to knock you off your post, and you might need someone, right, to bring, like, meaning like it's that,
give you a little structure,
right? But that's the no, you're saying no.
No, I'm just like, I please color outside the lines. I'm not.
It's good.
Yeah,
But it's great that there is that you have that awareness of the moment, and that you can accept it for what it is, even if, like you said, even if that moment you're like, wait, but this is the reality. So instead of running from it or doing all the things to avoid the reality, when you start to get comfortable with the reality, and I can always come back here. And like I say here, as if it's a place. I mean, yes, it's the physical vessel, but it's also, and to really come back around to the whole thing, that's that soul wisdom.
It is.
And I'm going to be so cheesy, but that's that coming back to the self, to knowing, like, if my kids are unhappy, if something's not going well with my partner, if something were happening in the world with politics, I can still be steady, because I have learned to curate that peace and that steadiness within myself, no matter what is happening around. And that is a beautiful life.
Absolutely.
That really is. And that's when you feel
well,
lucky.
I find everything you say just
So
so
good.
fascinating, and I love
Thank
it. I
you.
can just eat all of your words.
And you guys,
so good.
your questions get me excited that there are people that want to have this discussion, because I try to explain to people, I'm a medium and I connect with deceased people, but in a reading, it's a lot of the soul work. But when there's curiosity from bright people like you that are open, I know that there are so many skeptics to the work I do. I would be surprised if there weren't. I invite healthy skepticism, because what's skepticism? It's curiosity, right? And it is healthy. You should doubt what I do until you have the experience. And I'm not here to prove anything, because there'll be people that will remain skeptical. But if people like us that do three very different things can all come together and have a dialogue about the most important thing, which is, to me, self-acceptance and self-love. If we're all working on ourselves, everything outside of the walls of this podcast room is just going to be better.
Right.
Because I'm making things better for me, which means I'm making my environment better at home for the people I love, et cetera, et cetera.
We like to talk about that as like the ripple effect.
The ripple effect is real. So everyone, I hope that you have millions of people that watch this podcast, because if people can start doing the inner work and stop hiding behind religion, politics, this, that, the other thing.
That is how you heal the world.
because we're
Mhm.
all
Yeah.
individuals that come together. My first mentor, Suzanne Giesman, actually used the example of us all being little fragments of light in a disco ball.
I love that.
When the fragment of light is by itself, it's not nearly as cool as when it's, we're doing like staying alive to it, right? I mean, it's just, right. Think about how beautiful that is.
So if people wanted
Right.
to work with you,
Yes.
how do they get to you?
Best way to do it is to email me.
Okay.
Oh my God, and it's thesoulwisdom@gmail.com.
Okay, we'll link it.
to the
You'll
show
link it.
notes.
Okay.
Don't
and,
worry.
And my website is thesoulwisdom, all one word.com. SOUL wisdom.com.
Thank you.
Thank
Oh
you
my
guys
gosh.
so much
Thank you
for
so
having
much
me.
So
for
much.
So much fun.
dropping all the wisdom.
Always dropping wisdom.
We love you.
I love you guys. This was awesome. I want to do it
Thanks,
again.
guys. We will have you
Thanks.
back.
Me.